Hello and welcome to Wholesome Roots. I was lucky enough to get some great summer squash from a friend of mine and some fresh garlic. Also, the Vidalia onions were on sale, organic. Love when that happens. So I'm going to make squash casserole because I gotta use up those duck eggs somehow. I'm using these great flying saucer or patty pan style squash. I'm also using some long regular summer squash style and zucchini. Any of these will work in this recipe. So I'm cutting it up into bite-sized pieces, and that is my first step, is to get those cut up. So of course, living in the South, we use copious amounts of butter and everything. So I've got my cast iron skillet heating up. I'm going to put butter in that, and then I'm going to throw the squash and the onions in. I don't really measure everything out that much. I just think, well, how much squash do I need to fill my 13 by 9 pan? So it's probably, I don't know, 6 cups, maybe. And I used 1 onion. And I'm going to use probably 2 eggs, a little bit of milk, and a bunch of cheese. And that's going to be my stuff that I pour over the top of the squash that I put in my casserole dish. So I'm just going to cook my onions a little bit before I add the squash and just kind of get them started. And when they've gone slightly translucent, I will add the squash. And I'm not going to cook the squash completely all the way because it's going to cook in the casserole some. So I just want to get it started so that it really melts with all the flavors well. And it really does pull out the flavors of vegetables when you give them a little saute in a cast iron skillet with butter before you add them to a recipe. That's the way to do it. I even do that a lot of times with my chicken soup recipe. I'll oftentimes saute the carrots, onions, and celery before I add them to the soup. It just pulls out a lot more flavor, I think. So I'm just gonna stir this squash up here for a little bit just to get them started cooking and get them softened up a little bit. And then I will add the garlic at the very end and add a lot of garlic. So you can never have too much garlic in any recipe, especially not this. So I'm going to add that at the very end when the squash is just about where I want it, and then I'll stir it all in and put it into the casserole dish. I'm using a 13 by 9 for this recipe. You can do a smaller one if you use less squash, if you have less squash. We have a big family, so this is going to be our main dish tonight. It's going to be pretty awesome. As I'm cooking down the squash, I do add salt and pepper to taste. Whatever your taste buds desire is fine. I like a good amount of salt with mine, so I've probably got about a teaspoon of salt. And then I begin my batter. So I've got 2 nice big duck eggs. You can use any other kind of egg that you like. I'll add some salt and pepper to this as well, and a little bit of goat milk or any kind of milk that you like. So I'll probably use about 3/4 cup of milk, and I think that's it. And then I'm going to crush up a cup of crackers and shred some cheese. So one thing I like to encourage people is to experiment with your recipes and alter them as you go. And that's what I'm about to do. So normally I use a cup of shredded cheddar cheese or something to that effect. But I just remembered that my friend Dave brought me a huge amount of goat cheese. Oh, and he said it's a little bit spicy. It's got a little bite to it, and I thought, oh, that would be perfect with this. Just yum factor. So you can use any kind of cheese that you want. I mean, if you like Swiss cheese, use some Swiss cheese. Something that I commonly do when a recipe calls for cheese is I use a bunch of different kinds of cheese, and I hardly ever use just the kind that they tell me to. So experiment and use whichever cheese you like. And for the crackers, a lot of people use the traditional Ritz crackers. I'm using Annie's organic cheddar bunnies because that's what I have, because the boys love those. So that is what I'm going to put on top, and I thought the cheddar bunnies would be the best flavor to go with this anyway. Yum. It's gonna be good, huh? So I'm gonna finish cooking this squash, and I've got my milk and eggs whisked together with salt and pepper, and I'm gonna add my cheese to that mix. Alright, so I was just realizing I have a lot more squash than I said I did. I probably have more like 8 cups. So I am doubling the recipe I was originally talking about. So instead of just 2 eggs and 1 cup of cheese and 3/4 cup of milk, I'm using more like 3 eggs, 2 cups of cheese, and maybe 1.5 cups of milk. So the consistency for my batter that I'll pour over the top is just right. It is kind of like batter, like pancake batter. So I'm gonna let these squash cook a little bit more. You see how yummy they're looking? I'm gonna cook them down just a little bit more to get them a little softer. Then I'm gonna put the lid on the pan, let it soften up, and then I'm going to put it in the pan. Boy, we're gonna get there at some point, aren't we? All right, I just poured all my squash in the pan, poured the batter on top of it, and sprinkled the top with the cracker crumbs. And now I'm gonna put it in my oven at 400 degrees for 25 minutes or until lightly brown. All right, my house smells like Paula Deen's kitchen. It smells so good in here. I checked it at 25 minutes and it needed about another 10 minutes. So I put it in for another 10, and look at this. Beautiful. So I'm looking for the nice golden around the edges so that I know that it's set. I look for the bubbles coming up from the bottom layer to make sure that it's cooked all the way through. So you see it's set just like a quiche would. Perfect. Look at that. It's so hot I can't take a bite yet. But it is going to be perfect. Look at that. Boys are fighting over who gets to have the first piece. It's okay. I hope you guys have enjoyed this recipe. Please let me know if you try it, and if you make any changes to it, let me know how it worked, because those changes can always make it just right. So I hope you've enjoyed. Please like, share, comment down below if you have any questions, and subscribe to our channel. And we'll see you next time on Wholesome Roots.